Welcome, everyone, to holding a bookstore event, Best Practices for Authors, a workshop with Angelique Tung. So this workshop is brought to us by Straw Dog Writers Guild, which is a nonprofit, volunteer-run organization serving writers of all kinds in Western Mass and beyond. Whether you are a new writer or an experienced writer in any genre, you will find something in our programs that interests you. I am Michael Favala Goldman. I am a poet and a literary translator, and I volunteer with the Straw Dog Program Committee. So I have a few announcements from our program committee. Our next in-person reading, which is our monthly Writers' Night Out event at the Forbes Library in Northampton, will be in a couple weeks. Tuesday, March 4th, featured writer is Chaya Grossberg. And if you'd like to be part of the open mic, bring 5 minutes of material to join us. On March 9th will be our next Second Sundays. This is an open mic online. It is the second Sunday of every month. And so if you got 3 to 5 minutes that you'd like to try out with a very supportive audience, you can do that, and you can get the details and Zoom link through the Straw Dog website. Also, every single Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, 7 to 9, the next one is in 3 days this week on the 19th, 2 hours of community engaged writing hosted by Stephen Brewer. You can submit work, you can edit work, you can generate work. It's a great way to block out your weekly writing time. And you can get that from their website as well. We've also started an in-person meetup at the Dalton Library. It's called Curious Writers, and that is also every Wednesday at 6:30. For poets, I run the poetry critique meetups on Zoom twice a month. We're in our 7th year. It is open to poets of all kinds, of all experiences, and you can also sign up for that through the Straw Dog website. There are still some spots open for March and April. I want to thank Becky Jones for helping behind the scenes to set up today's workshop. And so we were assembling the panel for our workshop on Paths Through Today's Publishing Labyrinth. It's March 29th. And during that process, we received a response from someone in the eastern part of the state who organizes author events. And she shared with us a bunch of the wisdom that she's gained from this experience. And so it's my great pleasure now to introduce Angelique Tung. She is the events coordinator at Wellesley Books in Wellesley, Mass. She's also a writer. She's the associate editor at Brevity, a journal of concise literary nonfiction. She's also a reader for Pangyrus Lit Journal. Angelique has an MFA in creative nonfiction, and she teaches writing workshops to 9/11 survivors and first responders. Her work has been published in numerous outlets, and she's here today to talk to us about having a successful bookstore event. Please welcome Angelique Tung. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you, Michael, for this opportunity, and thank you, Becky, for your support. Yes, as Michael said, I am an events coordinator, and I realized that as writers, we take writing workshops, we take workshops about marketing our writing. But I felt like the authors who reached out to me, they were struggling. Sometimes. So we'll go through some of the requests that I've gotten. But I thought there would be an opportunity here to really just speak to other writers and just say, hey, here's what's working and here's what's not working. And, it's not going to work for everyone 100% of the time, but if you do a little research, I think you'll find greater success in getting into an independent bookstore. So what I thought we would do today, I have, 7 pages of notes. We will get to the heart of what we want to talk about today, probably around 45 minutes into this. But I just wanted to say, I'll talk for a little bit, I'll stop, we'll ask questions. If we need to go back to previous segments, that's fine. We'll take a bio break around 1:45. And if you need to turn off your screen and rest, or if you need to get up, please feel free. This is for you. This should be fun. I will try and make this as interactive as possible so that I'm not blah, blah, blah the whole time. So excellent. So I want to start with a question, and the question is, who has been, and you can just raise your hand, who has been to an author event at their local library or bookstore? Wonderful. Okay, so that's everyone. Terrific. The next part of that question is, was there something at the event that you thought, wow, this is really great? Or did you think, wow, there could be an improvement here? So I would say go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself and just raise your hand, and we'll just chat about that for a minute. Was there any author event that you were like, wow, this is great, I love this, or I didn't love that? Anything come to mind? Becky, go ahead.
Well, I have a great and a horrible. I went to one that was awesome with one reader and really bad with the other reader. And the first reader was very engaged. She stood in front of a podium, not behind it. And she engaged with the audience. She had pacing, she had variation in her voice. And the other person read from behind the podium and hardly ever looked up and read very quickly.
Uh-oh, is that me? Uh-oh. So I think I just, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I just lost connectivity for a moment. So that's very interesting. So that's a good thing to note when we're out there doing our bookstore events. Anyone else? Jessica.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. These are two very different experiences. They're both from when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and they both happened at Powell's Books. And so one was Augustin Burroughs, who I love and had seen many times around here. Excuse me. And he was just so amazing. He always interacts with the audience and just, tells his personal stories, and just is such a wonderful treat to always get to see him. And then, embarrassingly enough, I did go to see the 50 Shades of Grey author at Powell's Books as well. And she spoke for like 1 minute and then basically just made everybody buy books and had her sign them.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. Okay. Anyone else? Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I had really high hopes for a reading. I went to I guess it was last summer. I believe his name is Mossab Abu Toha. He was on the cover of Poets and Writers magazine, a Palestinian poet who was reading at Odyssey Books, and they did it at the church across the street. It's in our area here, and there were like 200 people there. It was a big event, and the sound quality was so poor that I couldn't understand a single poem that he read. And I think that everybody else was having the same trouble. It was such a shame. And I'm not really sure, maybe if they had done a sound check or something beforehand, maybe something could have been done, but I think it was a complete disaster.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. Okay. Well, we can.
Jonathan had his hand up too.
What's that?
I think Jonathan had his hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Jonathan. Go ahead.
No problem, and thank you. I went to one at the Odyssey Bookstore a bunch of months back, and what I really liked about it was, again, the interactivity of the author, but also there was someone there who was also an author and interviewed the author that was presenting, and that made the whole presentation richer and deeper. And there's a lot of connecting with the audience. So it held everyone's attention. Everyone was super engaged. And that made a massive difference, I think.
That's wonderful. And that is a great segue. So we will be talking about having conversation partners. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I'm glad you brought that up, Jonathan, because I think that's something we don't necessarily think about as we're going into this. So I'm just going to talk briefly about, since this is about independent bookstores, I'm not going to call out any big box stores in particular, but I just want to sort of create a foundation for the conversation we're having today. And I just want to point out, why independent bookstores? Why are they important to focus our energy on independent bookstores? And it really has to do with an ecosystem, right? So any community that you live in with an independent bookstore, that it is sort of it can be the heartbeat of a community. We had an event at the store the other night, and many people came up to me afterward and said, this was so good, partly because with the struggles that we're all going through right now in our world, we need community more than ever. And so, attending author events, being an author and speaking at an author event, you're not only doing this for yourself, but it's really for to bring the community together. So I just, I applaud everyone who's out there trying to get their work out into the world. And then I want to talk a little bit about traditional publishers versus independent publishers. And so the word independent can also be interchanged with self-publish. So, but I will use the word independent publishing, and it is inclusive of self-publishing. Anyone know the big five or one of the big five?
Penguin Random House.
Great, excellent. That's one.
Macmillan.
Awesome, two. Great.
Um,
No, this is good. Okay. I like this. I'm glad we're talking about this.
Simon & Schuster one?
Simon & Schuster, right? So you said Penguin Random House, Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, and there are two that are H names. One,
Harper.
Harper Collins, right? And then another one that's probably not as well known, and I'll just say it, it's called Hachette.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Right. So those are the big five. And there are, within that, each, they have, sort of smaller publishers associated within those houses. So you might have, I don't know, gosh. So Penguin Random House has Random House Doubleday. They have PRH Kids. They have, probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 sub publishers that fall under the umbrella of Penguin Random House. And then there are self-publishing outlets. And there are so many, I didn't even begin to write those down, but there's certainly the big box stores have self-publishing arms to them. There are also, you can go online and find many of the self-publishing houses. You want to be a little wary. I did. So is everyone familiar with Jane Friedman? Yeah. So if you are not following her, I would absolutely subscribe to her email. And I'm going to put a link in there, just in the chat. So just give me a second. But she, I found a really interesting, sorry, let me just copy the link. I found a really interesting piece about hybrid publishers, and I don't know if you've heard of pay to play. So there are publishers who will ask you to pay money to get your work published. So that's not a bad thing. So in the chat, this is it's a specific article about things to look out for hybrid publishers, for the independent publishers, if that's a route that you want to go. So I'm just going to stop for a moment and see if anyone has questions about publishers, independent publishing, independent bookstores. Again, this is just to lay a foundation. Go ahead, Michael. You look like you have a question.
I imagine that you're bringing this up because some of your events are set up by the publisher and not by the author. Is that
That's where I'm going. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the next piece, so I'm sort of starting at the top and like winnowing down. The next piece I want to talk about is the big five have their own in-house publishers. And so if you publish with Simon & Schuster, for example, you will be assigned an in-house publicist. And that publicist is responsible for going out there, basically contacting bookstores and contacting media agents. They work with Kirkus Review, they work with the New York Times Review, and really promoting your book, and also finding venues for you to have author events. Now, you might have a publicist who has 20, 25, 30 other authors they're working with. And so, this becomes a little bit of a, hierarchy where, the more well-seasoned authors might get more attention. So I have a gentleman who publishes debut memoir with Simon & Schuster. And I haven't heard from his publicist, and his launch is going to be in May. So, I may or may not, we've already scheduled an event. So, he's good. I will support him and help him along. But if you do go with a big house, don't be surprised if they are not out there doing all the legwork. However, I would say that you should be able to have access to them, in that if you need support, if you need help with a marketing plan, they should be able to help you with that. With independent publishing, you will not get a publicist, and you'll be doing this on your own. The next question that I get, that I was thinking about was, do you want to hire a publicist? So let's say you are with a smaller independent publisher. They're not assigning a publicist to you, but you think, well, maybe I should look into hiring someone. And so, that's entirely up to you. Some of the considerations would certainly be cost, because they can, you could have a consultation with a publicist and they might charge you a few $100s, and it could range up to $10,000. So it really depends on, whether or not that's something that you're interested in doing. A lot of people really like having agency, right? They like to know, what are the possibilities? Why am I not getting an author event? Who should I be communicating with? So again, if the hybrid link that I sent to you should have some really good information. Poets and Writers is also another really great source for information about this sort of thing. I'm just going to I've had a cough for about 3 weeks, so I'm just going to take a sip of water.
I also don't think that we got the link in the chat.
How's that? There you go.
Perfect.
Any questions about publicists? No. Okay. Wonderful. So, congratulations, your book is getting published in 6 to 12 months. It's usually a very long lead time. Again, with independent publishing, it can be a much shorter lead time, which is tricky. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So what do you do while you're waiting for your book to come out? So I guess the first question I would ask is, if you are working with a Big Five house, do you have a travel budget? And most of the time, you probably won't have a travel budget. The industry has changed. 50 years ago, you would have a worldwide tour and stay in lovely hotels and have dinners out every night. And the publishing, as we all know, the industry has changed so much. So we're not looking at, wining and dining anymore. We're looking at, I would say, bare bones. It's very, obviously none of us got into this industry to make millions of dollars. So, it's tricky, right? We do this because we love it. We do this because we have a story to share. So then now is really the time for you to do your research. So, does everyone live in the Northampton area? Around there. Okay. So a couple of things that I would think about as you are developing your marketing plan. Think about all the communities that you have. So for example, maybe you went to college in Michigan. Maybe you have family that lives in California. Maybe you have a large group of friends who live in Atlanta. Think of those as opportunities to expand your reach. So for example, your college friends. So the point that I will get to is, you want to think about what is your constituent base, right? It's going to be, certainly people in your immediate area, but it's also going to be all these other groups of friends and family that you have around the country. And perhaps you don't have that, but think of that as an opportunity to, go spend the night with a friend. And so then what you're going to do is you're going to name, the 3 to 5 places, the physical spaces that you think you can go to, and then you're going to start searching in those places. So let's say you have a great group of friends in New York. You're going to start looking in New York for independent bookstores. So you're just going to do a basic web search for those stores. And then once you take a look at those, you're going to need to drill down a little bit. And I'm terribly sorry. You'll need to drill down and really dig deep into a website. And what that means is, I want to take a look at, I'll share my screen in 1 second. We're going to look at Porter Square Books for a sec. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so can everyone see my screen? Great. Okay, terrific. So we can go to for authors and publicists. So this is going to tell us all the information that we need if we're an author, if we're going to reach out to them. Now, I will say that not all bookstores has a page set up like this, but if they do, they will tell you what kind of book is it? Is the ISBN available? Who's publishing and distributing? What kind of venue are you looking for? So you can go through and read this, and it will also say who to send the proposal to. Now, and they have a 2-week turnaround. So this just goes to events at Porter Square Books. So I'm going to stop sharing that. So you will spend time looking through the websites of all of these books. Now, is this cumbersome? Absolutely. It will, I think, in the same way that when you are reaching out to agents, you're doing the legwork, you're looking at agents, you're asking yourself, does this agent publish children's books? Or are they more interested in creative nonfiction? It's the same idea. You're really looking to see who is the best target for me. So I will say, for example, Wellesley Books, our constituents they love literary fiction. They really don't come out for poetry. So we will have one poetry, sorry, Michael, we'll have one poetry event for Poetry Month, and that's about all we can sustain because it's really not the genre that our constituents enjoy. So, yeah, so you'll want to really dig down, and that might require a phone call to ask the events people, hey, I'm writing speculative mystery. Is that something that your store would be interested in hosting an author event for? And you don't have to get into too much detail, but if they say, oh, that's probably not an area that that's really popular here, you might cross them off the list. So again, I would say do your research when it comes to that. I'm going to pause. Any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. Okay. I want to share one story of a woman who had an event at our store. She lived in, I want to say, Michigan, and she wrote to me and said, I'd love to do an event in your store. I'd love to do an event in your store. I already have a conversation partner lined up, and it's someone who had done an event in our store probably a year before. So that said to me, this person had really done their research. They knew who spoke in our store. They knew somebody in the area, even though they weren't from the area. They knew that this person was going to help bring in some guests. So I thought that was a really smart thing to do. So while you're looking at not only the events page, but take a look at the events they've had in the past. Look at the conversation partners and see, is this somebody who would be interesting to, are the books similar? Would the person be someone I'd want to have as a conversation partner? And then I would really, at this point, while you're still doing research, I would rely on other authors that So I would take into account anyone who's published a book already, anyone in a writing group, a teacher, someone who has been through this process before, and just take them out to coffee and say, what's worked for you? What advice could you give me going into this process? I'm going to grab some water again. Okay, terrific. Questions, thoughts? Pretty straightforward. Okay. So now we are going to, and I would highly recommend, if you are able to go to author events in your area, if there are stores in your area that you say, oh, this would be a perfect fit, go to an author event. And again, see if that's a good fit for you. If they're having, if they have events that are similar to what you're writing about, then I think that you can definitely have an opportunity to meet the events coordinator, introduce yourself, talk to them about your forthcoming book. I want to talk a little bit about social media, websites, that sort of thing. I know when we take our writing workshops and our marketing workshops, we're highly encouraged to have websites and our social media intact. And I think that I would continue to say, yes, absolutely. Have a functional website, have some footprint of social media, whether it's, I like Instagram. Some people still use Facebook. Facebook's great as well. X, Threads, TikTok, all of those are great. I think what it sends a message to event coordinators that you understand that this is one opportunity to get yourself out there, to promote your work. Because what's going to happen is once you get your event, the events coordinator, will create create our promotional material. We'll send it out to our constituents. We'll post it on the website, but it is also very much your responsibility to have an email list, have your events posted on your websites, on your Instagram, on your Facebook. So I definitely encourage that. So again, these are things that you're doing while you're waiting for your book to come out. You don't need to have 20 million followers, but if you have a few hundred between your email list of constituents and friends and coworkers and your Facebook and Instagram, if you have 500 to 1,000 followers, I think that would be, and that's not a hard and fast number, but I think, again, it's a signal that you are aware that this is an opportunity for you to capture your audience. Wonderful. So I'm sure you probably already know this, and I just made a note of it, but most bookstores don't pay for author events. So you're not getting paid to do this, but you will get paid in sales when your books get sold on the night of your event. Okay. So some other things that you can be doing while you're waiting is, do you know people who have podcasts? So you want to, start listening to some podcasts that are relevant to your genre. There's a guy I know. Does anyone know Mark Cecil? He's a writer, and he has a podcast called The Thoughtful Bro, and he's always interviewing these really interesting people. But definitely, it's a great opportunity for you to get out there. You add that to your bio on your website, and so you're really thinking about how can I build my CV, right? So, publishing a book, amazing, but the other side of it is that you really do need to be like a little marketing machine. And so podcasts is one way. Another way would be to see if you can get an interview in your local town newspaper. Find someone that, maybe something about your book is historical, and there's something historical that relates to your town. Or if you're writing about a specific person, maybe they did something in this town. So you want to find a way to really promote the idea of, here's why my book is relevant. It's relevant in this town. It's relevant in the community. It's relevant in the state. So really think about like creative ways to get yourself out there. And radio stations. I just heard Peg and Kennedy on NPR the other day, and I don't know if she has a new book out, and so that's, I was thrilled to hear her speaking. But if you can get in your local radio station, have someone interview you, and just continue to get you're trying to create buzz, right? You're trying to create the idea that, oh, this is interesting. This is something I want to read. This is relevant to me. So I'm going to pause there and ask if there are any questions. Yes, Gina.
When you are doing a book talk, or an author's night, do you have sales? Like, would I be selling myself, or are they paying like at a register that the bookstore is at? How does that work?
Yeah, so I will get to that, but I'll talk about what it looks like on the night of, but I will answer that question now. So, so we use a system called Eventbrite. Probably most of you have like signed up for event talks that way. And so, let's say there are 25 people signed up. I'm not going to do a one-to-one because it's not generally, there's usually like a 30% sell-through rate. So at 20 to 25 people, you would be selling 6 to 8 books. So, but I will have, let's say 20 books there available that night. And so people can either pre-purchase a book when they sign up, or they can purchase it the night of the event. So what happens is then, it goes through the whole process of, we buy the books and then your publisher will send you a check. So you won't get paid that night. But unless you're doing some sort of consignment, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I will go through in more detail what an author event looks like on the night of. So did I answer your question? Okay, great. Excuse me. Any other questions so far? Okay. And then let's talk about, I would say, maybe I'll call this low-hanging fruit, which isn't necessarily, I think it's a good thing, right? I think there are opportunities out there that that authors would be welcome to, and certainly libraries. So if you have a contact with your local library, if you can get in there and do a talk, and this would be closer to the release date because you don't want to have talks too far in advance, because if people won't be able to get your book. So you want to make sure to have that event close enough to the release date, but schedule events with your local library. Reach out to senior centers. Ellen Hildebrand was recently at Wingate, which is here in Needham. And of course, I think everyone knows who Ellen Hildebrand is. She is a prolific writer. She does so many events, but she's out there hustling. And so, and again, I don't know, maybe that's her publicist doing the work, but I do think that that says to me, she's not above doing an event at a senior center, right? And so it's an opportunity to practice your skills, which I think is amazing, because don't we all need practice? So I think, and what your local, do we have YMCAs in the area here? I'm from California. So you have YMCA, right? A lot of times they'll have author events, or if you have, smaller book groups, if you want to promote yourself as someone who would go to a book club, there's so many opportunities, and I'm sure you could probably think of some that I haven't thought of. So definitely take those opportunities to book those events, and we just have to be creative. Now, I will say that oftentimes we will have an event and we'll have 6 people show up, and I would love to have 25. I'd love to have 30. I'd love to have 50 people, but sometimes we get 6 people. And authors never want to cancel events. and we don't want to cancel events either. So, what I did, I had an author recently, she had 6 guests, and I thought, okay, and it was her debut novel. And she was very sweet. And so I got some cheese and crackers. We had a bottle of wine, some chocolate, and we sat around at a table, and it was very intimate. And so if you're in a situation where you have 6 people, make the best of it, right? Bring some store-bought cookies, gluten-free, crackers and cheese, whatever, but people are there to see you. They're there to support you. And I would I would encourage you to go into a group of 6 people with the same energy and enthusiasm that you would with a group of 250 people. So I would say, again, if I feel like there have been a few articles written lately of authors showing up with one person, and I can't remember who wrote the article, but just talking about how, how deflating it can be to be an author going into that situation. But we're still doing it. We're still out there doing it. So I am going to pause there and see if there are any questions. Michael, go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you. At some point, would you get into like what to say or not to say when you're querying an event?
Yes. Yep. That's the next section.
Okay, great.
So what I'd like to do is just take a 5-minute bio break. It's a 1:45, so we'll come back at 1:50. And the next part will be, we'll talk about the query letter, what to include, what not to include, and what an author event looks like on author night. How does that sound?
Great.
Awesome. See you in 5 minutes. That went fast. Okay, so it's 1:51. I don't know if our other, we'll wait another minute and see if our other people come back. I just wanted to mention besides we talked about places to be open to, libraries, senior centers, also schools and churches. A lot of churches are really, they love the community aspect of having a local author come and speak. So I definitely reach out to your local church or synagogue. Synagogues are also wonderful places. Our local synagogue has lots of author events. Okay. So just a couple things to note. Our store has, well, I don't have a better word for it except it's very seasonal. There's a seasonality in author events. So January, February, slow. March, April, May, busy. June, July, August, dead. September, October, November, I'm on roller skates. And the reason that's important to understand is because if an author's book comes out in July, we're really going to struggle to have a successful event for you. And a lot of times you have no control over that, but it's just something to be aware of. You know, I had a very popular, the publicist of a very popular author reach out, and they wanted to come on a Friday in July, and it broke my heart. But you know, it's just not, we can't do it. So again, not all towns are like that. You know, not all towns vacate during the summer. So if you live in that kind of town, yay. But just be mindful that that does often happen, and that is an obstacle that you might come up against. So just know that. Also thinking about, know when your public school vacations are. You know, I'm mindful of that. I have that on my calendar. I don't want an author coming in during a week where everyone's out of town. So just be mindful of that as well, because that will just help you in your own planning. It's like, I know vacation week's that week. I don't want to do it that week. I don't want to have an author event. So we're going to talk now. Oops, we're going to talk now about the letter, the email. So the first thing is, to the extent that you are able, it would be great. You know, a lot of the larger independent bookstores, they just have an events email. If you are able to go into the store and ask for the name of somebody, I feel like that sort of is a little bit more personal. But even if you are able to just say, "Dear events coordinator," it's much better than a sort of an email blast with no heading. Because I know, like when I get those emails, I know it's somebody who is just trying to blanket the bookstores with you know, with a request without really understanding anything about what they're looking at. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Um, so what I did was, I'm going to share my screen again, and I want to take a look at hold on one second. I just want to look at, okay, here we go. Okay, you can see my screen. Okay, so would anyone like to read, like, let's just go ahead and read these first two paragraphs. Do I have a volunteer? Would someone like to read that? Just unmute and go ahead.
I hope this message finds you well. I'm excited to share that my book, ABC, has just been released and has already become an international bestseller. Given its success, several fellow authors and I, all based in and all around Massachusetts, are eager to connect with readers and would love the opportunity to host a book signing event at your store. We believe that a gathering like this would not only celebrate the book's success, but also provide a meaningful chance for local readers to engage with the message of personal transformation and purpose.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So it's not terrible, but I will just point out, and again, you don't have to write a 20-page query letter. A few sentences will work, but here are a couple things that were missing from this. So I took out the name, just I didn't want to call out anyone. So they share their book. I would love to have a link to their website highlighting their book. So that would be the first thing. Telling me that it's an international bestseller, if you're going to tell me that, give me some details, right? Where? Like, I can't disprove that. So I'm sort of snarky. So I'm giving you the inside scoop. So, I'm just telling you how I read this sort of thing. Given its success, okay, so you still haven't told me how it's successful. Fellow authors and I are eager to connect with readers. Who are those people, right? I want to know who they are. I want to know, because if you tell me it's going to be Hank Philippi Ryan and Marjan Kamali, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, those are people who I've had in my store. I know them. Awesome. But it's very vague. So I would love to have as much detail as possible. Okay. So let's go ahead. Can someone else just read the next two paragraphs? Don't be shy. Think of this as practice for your author event.
So I can do it.
Okay.
So
Thank
I noticed in that first one, there was no description of the book either.
Right. Right.
So isn't that kind of important that there's
It is kind of important. Yes.
Okay. All right. So anyway, all right. So scroll down and I can read the little bit there. So it's just the first two paragraphs again.
Just the first two. Yeah.
Okay. Happy holidays. You don't know me, but we have dozens of New York Times best-selling author friends in common who have done events at your amazing bookshop and suggested I reach out. So here I am. Smile emoji. You'll see many of them on my board of the XYZ. So please read on, as this letter covers multiple ideas and not sure who to address this to. I was a #1 best-selling author, Bloomsbury, and now have an Irish-themed bio-fiction book that's about to drop on January 14th. It's already garnishing 5-star reviews, attached, and I've been interviewed as a cover profile for both the Times of London and the Sunday Times of Ireland, as well as People magazine and AARP, in anticipation and to time with the release.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Again, not horrible. But again, like, we have dozens. Who are these people? I want to know who they are. So I guess my point is, don't make claims that you can't back up. Like, if we have one friend in common, I would be happy with that. Tell me who they are. But again, it's so vague, that it just makes me feel like it's like writing, right? We don't need to have a lot of extra fluff in our writing, right? Like, let's just use the words we have and get to the point. So again, like, I don't want to pick too much on the authors. Okay. So I'll read this one. I'm writing to ask if you would consider inviting me to Wellesley Books for an author talk about my new and first book, XYZ, published recently by the Oriental Culture Institute, Boston, and Book Baby, ISBN, and on November 11th, available in print and distributed through Instagram. Perfect. So I'm just going to stop sharing and come back to you. So that was fun, right? I don't need to know about your children were born in Newton, or that, we wear the same shoe size, just the facts, ma'am. So ISBN is helpful. A link to your website is helpful. I'm just going to go, I have to open my doc again. If you have a connection to the store, I think that's really important. I would almost lead with that. I know the store manager, one of the booksellers, Michael is my best friend. We went to high school together, whatever it is. If you have a connection to the store, I would highly recommend just mentioning that. I think people will be more considerate that you have a connection to the store. If you've been to an author event, I would say that would be helpful. Hey, I was just at Sebastian Smee's event in October. It was amazing. I would love to have an event like that. So to the extent that you can organically include something personal, and relatable to the store, do it. Even if it's, I looked at your website and I see you have some amazing events coming up and blah, blah, blah. The other thing is, and we talked a little bit about conversation partners, and Jonathan, you'd mentioned having a conversation partner. Now, in our store, I would say 95% of our authors either have conversation partners or, or are looking for conversation partners. So 2 ways of doing this. One, if you have someone that you know who can be a conversation partner, ask them if they're available to do it, and say, hey, I'd love to have, I'm of course totally blanking on Laura Zigman be my conversation partner. She's agreed to be my conversation partner. We'd love to have an event there, blah, blah, blah. So it just makes it super easy. And so what happens in that case with a conversation partner, either the publisher or the bookstore. So I have a relationship with a lot of authors who do conversation, and I will generally give them the book to read beforehand, so that by the time their event comes up, they'll have read the book, they'll have established some questions. Oftentimes, I will have a conversation partner for someone, and they will meet the first time on the night of the event. That's always a little risky, but it's fun too, right? You just never know. I had, oh God, 13 Walks. Ben, God, I'm not going to remember his name. He wanted a conversation partner, and a friend of mine came in, and they had never met, and it worked out brilliantly because she's very thoughtful. So it was a really fun event. People who, you can certainly come in and do an event on your own. It's not frowned upon, but I would say it's so much more fun when you have someone who will come in with you, who who, can also, you can ask them questions as well. Ask them, tell me about what was your process like? So I think it's wonderful to be able to either have somebody going into it, or if you want somebody, you can say, I would be interested in having a conversation partner. The other option would be, if you're a debut author and maybe you're interested in being on a panel. A panel could be a lot of fun. It's a great opportunity for the store to have maybe some established authors and a debut author. So be open to suggesting some different options so that when the store sees your openness, you're like, okay, maybe I wouldn't have this person necessarily, but because they're so open to some other ideas, I'd be willing to work with you. Questions so far about that? Excuse me. Nancy.
What exactly is a conversation partner? Could you explain a little bit more of that? I'm just very new to all this.
No, wonderful. That's a great question. Yes, I wasn't sure how much to describe that. A conversation partner would be someone who is perhaps an established author, but they don't necessarily need to be, but somebody who has expertise or knowledge in that field. So for example, I had somebody in the store who was talking, it was an environmental book, and the person had also started an environmental nonprofit. So the idea is I will introduce, and I can go into more of this when I talk about the night of, but I will introduce the authors, and then they'll sit down and they'll say, oh my God, I read your book and I have questions. And so the conversation partner will say, Nancy, tell me about how you did the timeline, because I'm curious about the timeline in your book. Or I was really intrigued by the character Becky. And tell me more about, where did you come up with the idea for Becky? Or this is a memoir about trauma. How did you decide to write about this specific incident at this time? So it's really, they can ask anything, but it's really specific to the book, specific to the craft, specific to the author. Yeah, so does that answer your question? Yeah, and if they know each other, if the authors know each other, it's great because they can talk about, we were in this writing group together and, this happened, or, I learned from you or you learned from me. And so it's just a great way. Again, it does engage the audience because they're not just listening like you are right now to me drone on. But it's a fun way because, anyone who's been to an author event where you have just one person you're looking at, it's hard for them too, right? Because then it becomes sort of a, hey, a little bit of a show versus something that just feels a little bit more natural and organic. Does any other questions about conversation partners? Again, the conversation partner is in some way, the load is really on them because they have to read the book. Hopefully they like the book, but they do need to come up with engaging questions, right? Unfortunately, I feel like in this last year, we've had some great conversations. You imagine that there are people who, you're asking open-ended questions versus, yes, no questions. And so that sort of moves the conversation forward. Pardon me. So conversation partners. And another thing I would be mindful of is your book comes out in January. Don't send me an email in January because this is like the fashion world, right? We're already looking at the fall season. So again, sometimes with independent publishing, that can be really tricky because there might be a faster turnaround. But as soon as you are able to sit down, send out those emails, give independent bookstores, I'd say 6 months would be ideal, but 3 months works too, right? If your book comes out in February and you send me an email tomorrow, awesome. I can most likely squeeze you in. So a couple things. So you send out your email, boo-hoo. Sorry, we can't host an event for you. It's not going to work because we don't do children's events. We don't do events about self-help, whatever it is. The bookstores, replied to you and said, hopefully in a kind way. They say, thank you, good luck. Try not to. I know that this can be very hurtful, right? Rejection is always hurtful, but try not to reply to the events coordinator and say things like, you don't know what you're talking about. My book is going to be an international success and you're a loser. I have had someone who stalked me because I didn't have an event for them. So, again, a gracious, like, I understand, thank you so much. You want to maintain a good relationship with people because you're going to write another book. You're going to, someone might ask you to be a conversation partner. You just never know, right? It's a small world out there. You don't want to run into somebody at the NEBA conference and say, oh, you were that jerk that stalked me and wrote nasty things to me. So just, again, it's hurtful. If you think that they misunderstood you, I'm all for clarity. If you say, oh, oh, my book isn't really about this, it's about this, it is literary fiction, you could, there's a nice way to go back and say, maybe I misspoke or whatever it is, but try your best not to be a meanie to people. On the other hand, congratulations. We would love to have an event for you, Michael, at our store. We're booking, your book comes out in May, and so we'd love to have an event with you in May or June. And so we'll decide on a date. We'll decide if the format, will you have a conversation partner? Will it be a panel? Generally, the evening, so I send out the run of show, which is you arrive 15 minutes beforehand. You'll have a little you'll be in the green room. You'll have a conversation with your conversation partner or your panel. You'll be let out to the event space, and you'll be introduced by the events coordinator. I thank the audience, turn off your phone, and the program, they'll be in conversation for 30 minutes, let's say. We'll open it up to Q&A, and then we'll have book signing. So that part is pretty straightforward. Let's see if there was anything. Before that happens, though, usually a marketing specialist will ask you for your assets. And I'm not talking about your bank statement. I'm talking about assets is a word that I didn't know before I started here. So I just want to make sure that you will be familiar with this word. It is your bio and your headshot. So make sure that you have a headshot because it's going to go up on a website and everyone's going to see it. And so let me just, I'm going to share my screen one more time, and I'm just going to pull up. There we go. This is what our events website looks like. So this is the headshot for Melanie Brooks. And another woman, Shamita Dasgupta, came to another event, and she introduced herself and said, I have a book coming out. I'd love to do an event. So she came to an author event. She got an author event through us. So this is what our events page looks like. So that's what we have going on with that. So just so you know, again, the word asset is, I just want that to be familiar to you. Okay. Great. And then again, night of the event, you'll show up, you'll have your conversation, Q&A, and the events coordinator should orchestrate all this. So you're not, we're not throwing you up on stage and then leaving. I'll let you know it's 7:45, we should wrap it up. And then afterward, they usually want to take a picture with you. We have events downstairs, so I bring the authors upstairs to a signing table where I will have flapped all the books. So a good events coordinator will, do several things. They'll have they should have water available, pens available, they'll flap the books. You'll have sticky notes. When people line up, I have sticky notes. I'm writing people's names so that, even if your grandmother shows up, you're in that moment, you're like, hi, grandma. What's your name? Sometimes we just get like that face blindness. You're like, I know, it's my sister, but what's your name? So just the sticky notes help make it a little bit easier. And then once you're done with your book signing, we shake hands, give a hug, say thank you for coming, and voila. And I think Michael and I talked a little bit about this yesterday. Generally, there isn't a lot of follow-up. I often send, like with Simon & Schuster, they want to know how many books we sold, how many people show up. But you don't have to write anyone a thank you note or send them flowers or anything. The event and selling books is generally enough. And that's what I have for you. And I'm going to go ahead and look in the chat. Great. Okay, so you guys were chatting with each other. Wonderful. So I want to go ahead and just open it up. You can unmute yourselves and we can just have a conversation. Nina, go ahead. You're muted.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay.
So I had a question. My first book came out in the height of the pandemic, and I did have some connections, but nobody was doing readings in person at all at that time. So that was 2 years ago. I did get to be on, thanks to Straw Dog, they did the Zooms that they do, and I was able to read on that. So my question is, would anybody be interested in doing giving a reading for a book that's not just about to come out or coming out?
That's a great question. So I would say it depends. What I have found, and again, this is sort of going back to the community piece that I was talking about earlier. We had a panel last week. No one had a new book. But one of the things that I wanted to do was just create a sense of community. And so what I would suggest to you is, what is your genre?
It's fiction, and the book is a book of connected short stories.
Okay. So what I would suggest is that you put together a panel and say, I have 2 other friends, and maybe they are, if you can find some other fiction writers who are, well known, who have the name recognition. I'm not saying that you don't have name recognition. I'm just saying that, if managers always hire people smarter than they are. So, and I think the same applies with this industry, right? You want to associate yourself with people who are successful. And so if you can also find other successful writers, and maybe they don't have books coming out, but you say, hey, hey, Bookstore, I know you do literary fiction. I have 3 authors and, we'd love to do an event to create community. So you can do it from that perspective, that approach. The other idea would be to sell yourself as a conversation partner, because one of the things with the conversation partners that I do, I will absolutely have books available for the main speaker, but I also have backstock and current books for our conversation partner, because, it's, if the conversation partner just happens to mention, I wrote and generally they're not talking about themselves. A good conversation partner, like Andre Dubus III, came in with Melanie Brooks and didn't talk about himself at all. So lovely, you never know, but he was lovely. But I had all of his books there, just in case people were like, oh, who is this Andre Dubus III guy? I might be interested in reading some of his books. So again, panel, so reach out to events coordinators and say, hey, listen, I have this fiction book, literary fiction. If you ever need a conversation partner, I'm interested. But that also means you might need to go to some author events and see how that works, so that you can sell yourself as someone who knows what they're doing. So is that helpful? Does that answer your question, Nina?
It's information I did not know about it, the whole idea of selling myself as a conversation partner, but yeah, but I was hoping that you would have said, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
No, every Tuesday we have new releases, 20 new releases, which means that we only have so much room for every book. So, I mean, 6 months would be pushing it. And I feel terrible for anyone who was in your shoes. That's not, it's not fair. It really isn't. And unfortunately, I have had several people reach out to me who are in a similar situation. And it's really tricky. And I'm terribly sorry. I wish I had a better answer, but that's an honest answer.
There's a question in the chat from Maureen about how much should you read from your book at an event? Now, I heard you say you got a half an hour, and so like maybe is it all reading, or is it a combination of reading and interacting? Like how do you like to frame that?
So my preference, so it can sort of run the gamut. You don't have to read at all, right? Because two things. Most people will not have read your book. And so you're reading a snippet from a book where the audience has no context. So you can say, okay, this person gets, murdered at the end. It's like, okay, well, how is that going to be relevant when I hear you read for 5 minutes? It's fine. You can read for 5 minutes, or 2 minutes or whatever. But I think that ideally the conversation partner will sort of draw out thematic ideas from the book, such that you don't need to read. However, I would say, reading a couple pages is good. We had an event a couple weeks ago, and the author read way too much. And it just felt awkward after a while, right? It's like, it just felt awkward to have to be read to for such a long period of time. So I would say the less reading, the better, unless, as an author, you're like, I really love this passage. It speaks to me. Again, but it's not required to read. But if you're going to keep it short. Maureen, did that answer your question? Oh, Maureen's, yeah. You can just type in the chat, Maureen, if that answered your question. Excuse me. One other thing, awesome, thank you. So I'd mentioned Mark Cecil earlier. Mark Cecil is brilliant. He asked, so he was in a writing group. I think he was in a writing group with Shelby Van Pelt. I don't know if people are familiar with Shelby Van Pelt, but she wrote, it was the octopus book. I can't, anyway, her book was on the New York Times bestseller. It was his event, but he asked her to be the conversation partner. So all of a sudden people are like, hey, I'm coming to the Shelby Van Pelt event. And I was like, it's really not her event because her book had been out for a while, but it was brilliant because people came to see her and saw him as well. So again, to, speak to the idea that if we are able to find conversation partners who have an existing audience, that would be the best thing to do, to find somebody who's really popular. One other thing I will mention, if you don't follow Hank Philippi Ryan, or maybe you're familiar with her work, she's written a ton of books. She is, again, one of those people that we must have done 6 events with her, not necessarily in the store, but there are law firms who are interested in her books. So they'll buy 100 books and they'll give them away, and she'll come and speak to the law firm. She is just on fire always and enthusiastic about those 6 people who show up to her event. So she would be somebody that I would love for her to give a marketing class too. Like how do I do this as an author? But I think just seeing she has a website, she sends out a newsletter. She's very engaged in the business of being an author. So she's definitely somebody that I would check out. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead, Mary.
If, let's say my book is gonna come out in September. So if I'm trying to get things going ahead of time, I had a book come out last February, and you're right, it's live when it's live, and then it's just sort of dead unless you're a really amazing marketer. And I'm very new at this. But let's say if my next one comes out in September, I'm thinking, so what I should do is start reaching out in, say, July to bookstores and saying, my book will be out in September, and then try to keep booking things out for maybe the next 4 or 5 months, a couple of events each month to just kind of get that while it's get that buzz at the beginning.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I would say start even sooner because, again, are you in Northampton area as well?
I'm in Central Mass.
Okay.
Worcester, a little west.
Oh, okay.
Worcester.
Okay. So I would say May would be good because, so I get back to people right away. Just that's how I am. Sometimes it could take 2 weeks for people to get back to you. So if you reach out in July and we've got the 4th of July weekend and then people on vacation, if they don't get back to you until August, you're already too late, because then August, I'm already booking for September. It's February. So the September calendar gets filled up pretty quickly. So I would say May would be the sooner rather than later, but I'd say no later than May. But yeah, so starting in May, you're gonna go and it'll be in waves, right? You're gonna reach out to 5 or 10 bookstores, book a couple events in September. You're going to continue to do that. I would say through the end of the year, you will have an opportunity to do the libraries, do the bookstores, and if you can do podcasts and interviews and, print, again, it's a lot of work that, 50 years ago, someone else would have been doing for us that you thought, oh, I did all the hard work of writing this book and I have to go and promote the damn thing. Yes, you do. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Yeah. And are all of your friends and family and colleagues in the Worcester area?
No, I went to college in Boston and I went to graduate school in Cambridge. I really haven't, I mean, obviously a long time ago.
Yeah.
Well, not 25 years that I went to graduate school. So I haven't really tapped into some of those, maybe
Okay.
alumni book groups or, I'm just coming up with a lot of ideas.
Good.
I wish I had followed through on a year ago, but
It's not too late. I
no,
think,
live and learn.
yeah. And I think now is a really good time, it's what, February, now is a really good time to reach out to those contacts in Boston and say, just trying to come up like, do you have 100 people? Right? So, perhaps, if you have 100 to 200 people, you can say to whatever bookstore in the Boston area, I have a constituent of, 200 people that I can invite. With the caveat, I will say you have to be very mindful and demure. You may, if you have 200 people, that's not all 200 are going to show up. You might get 20-ish people from that. But if you're going to do an event at Harvard Square Books, you probably won't do an event at Porter Square and at Brookline Books and at Newtonville Books because of proximity, right? So you have to be very careful to make sure that you choose the right event location. Again, if you're Mel Robbins and she just came out with a let them theory, everyone wants Mel Robbins. And so, some people can sustain multiple events in a small area, but what's going to happen is if you have, an event here, an event here, an event here, your audience gets diluted, right? They're not going to come to 3 events in the same area. So just think about what's going to be, the biggest bang for your buck. Yes, if I can use that term. We're at 2:32. I'm happy to continue to have discussions because I want this to be helpful for you. I want you to be successful. Other questions, thoughts?
I think we've done well. Are there any final thoughts that you want to leave with us before we sign off, Angelique? Or you feel like have you covered everything?
Final thoughts. So I will say that I will provide in the next few days, I will get to Michael a list of some links. I will include a sort of a sample email that you might send out to an event coordinator. And because you're all so nice, if you ever have a question, you can reach out to me at Angelique@Wellesleybooks.com. I'm happy to answer questions for you.
Great.
I really do. I know what it's like to be on that side, to be a writer, to want to get your work out there in the world. And I really do want to support everyone who's doing this hard work. It's hard work. It's lonely work, and we need community more than ever. So.
Yes. So as Angelique said, everyone who registered for this will get a document in your email with specific information and advice. And thank you, Angelique, for sharing your wisdom and experience with us today. Thanks everyone for coming and for supporting Straw Dog Writers, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you
Thank
so
you, everyone.
much.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
weekend.
you.